perfect. So I've been so excited to tell you. I watched it. Saturday morning was the Formula E race in Sao Paulo. It's the first time that I watched a Formula E race. You haven't seen a Formula E race yet? Not a full race?
Not a live one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I think I might have watched one before, but it was like a replay.
Oh, okay, got it. So, well, I knew a little bit about it because, of course, we've made a video about it earlier. And I watched the full unplugged season of Formula E, which is their Drive to Survive, essentially, which I watched prior to getting into Formula E now. So I had some familiarity with, of course, the rules, and some of the drivers seemed familiar. So I was excited going into it. I had tried previously watching it, remember, but I made a mistake with the time, and then the replay wasn't available on Roku immediately, which caused a little bit of frustration. However, this time I put it on my calendar, I set a reminder, and it was available on Roku this time again, which is nice because it is for free. But I would love for it to also be available on F1 TV, just so
I mean, I understand why it's not, because it's not anything to do with F1, right?
Yeah,
it's
no, of
like
course.
ABB or something like that. I don't know. I just wish it would be, like we've talked about this a couple times now on the channel, I wish it would just be in one place and consistently there, and that we would already know where to watch.
Exactly.
You know? Because they kind of release this as it goes on, and I think that is a terrible way of managing it. Like, why are you not telling your fans where to watch it, or new people? And for me, like, if I would be going into the series, right, and I don't even know when I could watch it, I'd be like, okay, I guess this is not my destiny.
Yeah, that is very true, very true.
Anyways, but tell us about the race, because apparently it was wild.
Oh my gosh, yes. So it started off a little bit slower. The start was nice. I mean, there was no crash or anything at the beginning, which is always nice, of course, for the drivers, that nobody DNFs right out of the gate. It lacked a little bit of was a little bit conflicted at the beginning. So there was a lot of on-track action, but it wasn't super exciting. So the pack was really close together. There are 22 drivers on the track. They're pretty much stick together right from the beginning, which is exciting because they're so incredibly close. There's a lot of position switching, but from what I've gathered also from the commentators, at the beginning, it doesn't matter quite as much who's leading yet, because the ending is what really determines it, because everybody's a little bit more on reserve. They're trying to save their battery. Of course, there's strategy going into it because you have the attack mode.
There's also no mandatory pit, is that correct?
Correctly. Correct. There's no pitting, essentially.
No mandatory pitting.
Exactly, yes. There was 2 people that went into pits because of issues, but not because you have to change tires or anything. But you have the attack mode, which was interesting to see, because I had heard about it or read about it, so I knew theoretically how it worked, but I had not seen it, so it was nice to see. So they don't have DRS, they have the attack mode where they get extra 50 kilowatts power,
like boost,
exactly, for a total of 8 minutes during the race, which they can divide up into 2 stints.
Okay.
So they can do like 2 and 6 or 4 and 4, whatever they want. So that was kind of interesting to see when people used it, because there was also 2 safety cars during the race, which is, okay, so going in, it was only supposed to be a 31 lap race.
So it's 45 minutes plus 1? Or do they go by laps?
It was by laps.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was 31 laps originally, but because of the 2 safety cars, they ended up adding 3 more laps at the end. So at the end, it was 34 laps in total.
Interesting.
Which I thought was interesting too, which I didn't realize going into it. So that was interesting. Then, of course, using the attack mode was interesting when people decided to activate it.
It definitely adds like a strategic component to
Very much so, because when they activated, you have to go out of the racing line,
they have
of
to
course.
Go through the activation mode.
Exactly, yeah, to the activation zone.
It's like if you ever played, like, I think it's like Extreme G Racing, or like any of those like Nintendo, like what is it, like what is Z Fighter? Not Z Fighter. It's like those like floating airships, and then you have to go through the stripe on the side to fuel up or get your boost in. That's how I always envision it, because they always have like that CGI in for the attack mode. That's how
exactly, which was kind of cool to see. But it was also, of course, they lose a couple of spots when they go onto the attack mode strip, just because they're so close together. So immediately they lose like 3 spots. So it's really about strategy and figuring out when in the race is smart to use it. And then also, if you activate it and then during your activation time there's a safety car, it sucks for you
But-
because you can't change it. You don't save it again.
So
You just lose it.
so when you activate the attack mode,
Mhm.
right? You can then cancel it.
Mm-mm.
So you input it ahead of the race, how it'll be.
Well, I guess the engineers input like how much time you want to activate it for for that stint.
Okay, yeah, that's a bummer.
So yeah, so there's a lot of strategizing going into it, when to use the attack things. Also the battery, which I thought was so interesting. So I was looking, they show the battery level of the cars throughout the race, which I thought was really cool. So at like lap 23, which is, at that point, it was less than 10 laps before ending. They still had like 40% battery left. Some of them, because they really save it to the end to really make some charges and things. And that's literally what happened. So because of the safety cars, Sam Bird, the McLaren driver, was leading majority of the race, which he was not happy about, because apparently leading the race makes it difficult for you to manage your energy levels. So it's a little bit more tricky. So you want to drive
because
behind.
you're the one setting the pace and not following someone.
I guess so. And then also, I don't know if it has also to do with because they're not in a slipstream, because they're literally so close behind each other. So that was really interesting. You could hear him complain over the radio about it.
Was he like wishing someone would overtake, or what was he saying?
Yeah, he was just like, yeah, he wished somebody was overtaking. And then also there's some like speed rules, which I didn't quite understand, of how much space they have to have behind him to not get, I guess, maybe too much advantage of it. So he was complaining about that, to maybe get like penalties or some rules enforced, which I still have to look into because I didn't quite understand that. But essentially he was leading for majority of the race. And then Mitch Evans was behind him. He's the Jaguar driver. So it was him, Bird, Pascal Wehrlein in the Porsche. Those were like the main contenders for most of the race for third. Then eventually Jack Dennis came also into the mix. So he was fighting with Pascal Wehrlein for a while. He's a German driver for Porsche. So that was really interesting.
There's a lot of German drivers on the grid.
Yes, I have one more German driver to point out a little bit later, but I want to get to the finale first. So they ended up extending the race from 31 laps to 34 laps. So Evans eventually took over. So he was leading. Sam Bird was second. Jake Dennis and Pascal Wehrlein were still competing constantly back and forth for third place for the final podium spot. Then the last lap, I think it was the last corner, the last really opportunity, Sam Bird passed Mitch Evans on the outside because Mitch was defending on the inside. So he's like, this is my last opportunity.
I'm like, go for it.
Yeah, he passed him. Then he was able to like just push the last bit of energy out of the car and made it and won his first race in 36 races, because he's the second oldest Formula E winner ever in this now 10th season.
That's awesome.
I know. I was really happy for him, because also during the Unplugged show, where he was of course also featured because he's been in Formula E for so long, he was talking about how he's not had like wins in a long time, and so it was really nice to see. And he was,
I mean, I'm
so,
sure it wears
so
on
thrilled.
you. I mean, that's the same thing, not to bring up F1, but like I guarantee you it wears on Lando that Oscar got his win, even if it's just a sprint, right? Like you can't tell me if you're always this close and all your peers are getting there, all of them made it to the top step and you're not. I'm sure that like that wears on you.
Yeah, I agree. But so it was really nice to see him.
That's awesome, yeah.
But then, so because we watched the action of 1 and 2 so intently, we missed that the person who was originally in 5th place snuck by Wehrlein and Jake Dennis to end up taking the 3rd place on the podium. Also in the last turn, Roland is his name with Nissan.
You know what that is? That's some Pierce Brown energy.
Yes, Pierce Brown AMA Supercross energy, 1000%. But it was just so cool to see, because I had not seen him. He was not like in the talks throughout the race really, and then suddenly he just like, because they were busy with each other, he snuck past them. They were almost 3 cars wide going into like the final stretch, and then he took the podium, which was so cool. So there was a lot of excitement at the end, but you did I feel like had to wait for the end to really, for things to pop off. Because luckily, of course, nobody was injured. There was one crash into the wall because somebody, front wing broke off, got stuck under the car, or not got stuck under, but went under the car, which kind of messed with the steering and the braking. So he went right into the wall. So that was not great, but fortunately, there was no other like big incidences, but it was really exciting. At the end, I was up on my feet. I was yelling because it was like so much excitement at the end.
That's why we got the noise complaints. You know, when I think about Formula E, the one thing I always think about also is that they're much rougher. They're much more like elbows out.
Yes.
Than I feel like other races I've seen. I mean, in AMA Supercross also, but I'm talking specifically like open wheel
or single seaters.
Racing. They're like, I'm gonna make my room, you know.
Exactly. That's why I was expecting just a little bit more action. I mean, there was a lot of taking over, switching positions. You had no idea how things were gonna end. But yeah, I definitely expected maybe more crashes. Because I also have to say the cars look very interesting. Like they do look like a typical single seater, but they're also a little bit more boxy. They have a little bit more surface.
Especially now the newer edition, right?
Exactly, the Gen 3 currently. But then I was also thinking as I was watching it, I think it would be even cooler at night. Because they have those like LED blue lights.
Is there a night race?
That's what I meant to look up. I didn't look it up right now, but I think that would be really cool, especially if most of those races are at night, because they're all really colorful. You have the lights on them. I kind of imagine it like the bright colors that we saw at the Daytona 24-hour, the Rolex 24 on iRacing.
Yes, I don't know, iRacing, yes. I was like,
because they're so like colorful and bright, and so I think that would be really cool.
Was it one? No, it was the real life one.
Well, it was both.
The real life one.
Yeah, it was the iRacing first,
not the iRacing,
and then the real one.
Yeah, the real one.
So I thought that was one of the things. I was like, oh, I wish it was night because I think it would just look cooler.
Especially because it's a lot of them are street tracks or street circuits, so you have also the lights of the city. And
exactly.
Depending on the city, it could look really cool.
But it was one of the things. Also, I thought it was very clearly a street track. I mean, obviously you see that it's on the street, but it's also, there was very little runoff area. It seemed extremely crowded. Like, yes, there are 22 cars. Yes, there are a little bit bigger cars, but it still felt like a lot, you know?
Okay, you might not know the answer to this, right? But do you know if there is a size difference between Gen 2 and Gen 3 cars?
I think there is, or I'm pretty sure there is, but I don't remember like the details and in what area. Because I know there's a weight and a size difference.
I'm just wondering if they're like, we're getting, not that this is the case, but are we getting to a point where like the cars are outgrowing the tracks, right?
Interesting. Just like F1 essentially with like Monaco, like their cars are too big.
Yeah.
I don't know for sure.
Because the good thing is kind of also with Formula E, right? You don't, even though a lot of them are in the city, and I think maybe that's why maybe more cities are also okay with it, is you don't really have the noise pollution that you get from like gasoline cars. I know a lot of people don't like the sound, but I understand why it maybe makes it a little bit more popular in cities, in big cities, because you don't have this like overwhelming sound. Like in Berlin or something like that, it's a bustling city, right? It's already quite loud.
I mean, they were in the middle of Sao Paulo, so
same thing, right?
Completely agree. And that's what was one of the things I was thinking about too. One, for a night race, I think the sound would be, I don't know how loud it is, but it kind of reminded me of like Tron, like the sounds of those vehicles. That's why I think at night would be really fun with lights and stuff like that. But I do agree, like the sound is definitely something to get used to, because it is like almost like a whistling, high-pitched whistling kind of sound. But also we watched was it like Formula 3 and Formula 2, it also sounds more like,
well, Formula
whistling.
2 now has the sound, they didn't realize that with the new cars, because they all have new cars this year, right? And that now I think it's the DRS or something like that causes that actual whistling sound. I don't think the previous generations did that.
Interesting. Okay.
But so I guess I think that could help, but once again, I said that in a different video. I'm excited for them to more and more race on actual tracks.
Agreed.
Then you also have maybe cars that, go off track but don't automatically DNF because they take damage because there is a runoff area. So I think I'm excited to see what is in store for Formula E. I really want to watch my first live race too, obviously.
I agree. I think there's things happening for it because there were a lot of people there. There was also like Bernie Ecclestone was there, which is obviously, of course, a huge name in racing. Emerson Fittipaldi was there. He was the one that gave out one of the trophies. His brother had passed away earlier this week, and then they're, of course, a big racing family. Fittipaldi.
His brother?
I think it was his brother.
No, his uncle.
Or his uncle, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, it was his uncle, but he passed away like 2 or 3 weeks ago because that happened after his F2 win, remember?
Oh.
Before his F2 win,
but it was, this Emerson Fittipaldi is older.
Oh.
Yeah, he's like a 2-time F1 champion.
Oh.
So,
sorry. I thought it was the young dude. I was like...
No, I was like,
oh my God,
no.
another person passed away?
No.
Like,
He's,
oh
yeah. He's, so I had a little issue with the time. Yeah, I thought it was more recent. But yeah, it was
it's a senior essentially.
Like it's one of the seniors. It sounds like a big, very successful racing family.
Yeah, that's what they do.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So he was there, which was also nice, and it seemed like it meant a lot to a lot of the drivers, of course, too.
Yeah, because like 2 times F1 champion.
And then what I also thought was really funny. So at the end, because you know how in Vegas also the drivers get into a car to be driven to wherever the podium ceremony is.
It's like the parade, the driver's parade.
No, it wasn't even.
Afterwards. Wasn't it really awkward with Charles?
Yes, exactly.
They were like all squished in the tiny guy.
So this one they had 2 people in the back and 1 person in the front, so they didn't all sit in the back seat. But what I thought was very funny was that Felipe Massa was driving them to the podium. He was their driver.
Wait a minute. Okay, now this is exciting, but isn't that also where the drama is? Isn't he suing FIA and Ecclestone?
I don't know. But I thought it was really cool, and I also loved seeing, because they show, of course, the insight. You know how in F1 after the race they go into that room where they kind of debrief with each other, the drivers. So they did that in the car, but they also had conversations with Felipe explaining how things were, and he was asking them. So that was really cool to see as well. So I enjoyed that little. I felt like it was like an Easter egg almost, because I'm not sure if everybody would recognize Felipe Massa. But
yeah, who knows?
Yeah, I don't know either. But so I thought it was really cool. So one last thing that I want to...
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
So that's just the last thing I wanted to point out, because you mentioned German drivers. So there was one more German driver that I want to point out. So Maximilian Günther is his name. And then he started...
Real German name.
I know, right? So he had started in last position due to a penalty. I don't remember off the top of my head what the penalty was for, but he started in 22nd place, the last person on the grid, and he ended in 9th.
That's actually really, really great.
That's really, really impressive. So I'm excited to see him. Hopefully I get to watch the next race as well to see. Hopefully he starts not all the way at the end. But I think regardless, it's still a huge achievement to make it through 12 people, or almost 12-ish people on the grid.
I will also say is like for anyone that's listening to this and who might be interested in Formula E, but who's like, oh, I watch a lot of Formula 1 and stuff like that. The Formula E season is much shorter.
Yes.
So it's much less of a commitment than Formula 1. So,
yes.
So definitely go in and check it out.
Definitely. And also the races are shorter. So it's also just like a nice bite size. It's not too much of a commitment.
Yeah.
So I highly, now that I've seen it, I definitely recommend watching it.
Checking it out. Yeah.
Yes.